Short arms. Short arms are one of the biggest natural advantages anyone can have for the bench press. The reason is simple: less distance to move the bar. When someone has shorter arms, the bar travels a shorter path from their chest to full lockout. This means less total work is required to complete the lift, but there's more to it than just distance. Short arms also create better leverage at the shoulder joint. The shoulder acts like a lever during the bench press, and shorter arms mean a shorter lever. A shorter lever requires less force to move the same weight. This is why people with short arms can often bench press more weight relative to their body size compared to people with long arms. The advantage shows up most at the bottom of the lift, where the bar is on the chest. At this position, the shoulders are under maximum stress. Short arms reduce this stress significantly because the distance from the shoulder joint to the bar is smaller. This makes the entire movement more efficient from start to finish. Thick chest. A naturally thick chest is another major advantage for the bench press. This advantage works by reducing the range of motion even further. When someone has a deep rib cage or a naturally thick chest, their sternum sits higher off the bench. This means the bar doesn't have to travel as far down before it touches the chest. Think of it this way: if two people both have the same arm length, but one has a chest that's 2 inches thicker, that person only needs to lower the bar 2 inches less. That's a significant reduction in the total distance the weight needs to move. Less distance equals less work, which means more weight can be lifted. The thick chest also provides a larger, more stable contact area with the bench. This improved stability helps with force transfer and makes it easier to stay tight throughout the lift. The advantage is purely structural. It exists regardless of technique or muscle size. Arch-friendly torso. The ability to create a big arch in the bench press depends largely on spine structure. Some people are naturally built in a way that allows them to arch more than others. This isn't just about flexibility, it's about the actual shape and length of different spine segments. People with shorter upper back segments relative to their lower back can typically create a more extreme arch. This arch lifts the chest higher off the bench, which again reduces the distance the bar needs to travel. The bar path gets shorter without the arms getting any shorter. This advantage is a bit more indirect than the previous two. It doesn't directly make someone stronger, but it allows a setup position that makes the lift mechanically easier. The spine geometry either permits a big arch or it doesn't. Someone with the right structure can elevate their chest several inches higher than someone without it, even if both people have similar flexibility. Short femurs. Short thigh bones are probably the single biggest anatomical advantage for the squat. The femur is the bone that runs from the hip to the knee, and its length dramatically affects squat mechanics. When the femurs are short, the hips don't have to move as far back and down to reach full depth. This creates better leverage at the hip joint. The hip has to work like a hinge during the squat, and a shorter femur means less distance between that hinge and the weight on the back. Less distance means less torque, which is the rotational force the hips must produce. Lower torque demands mean the same muscles can move more weight. Short femurs also allow a more upright torso position. When someone squats down with short thigh bones, they don't need to lean forward as much to keep their balance. A more upright position means less stress on the lower back and more efficient use of the leg muscles. This is why people with short femurs often have squats that look effortless compared to people with long femurs who have to fold over significantly to hit depth. Long torso. Having a long torso relative to leg length is a significant advantage for squatting. The torso length affects where the weight sits in relation to the hips and legs. A longer torso means the bar doesn't have to drift forward as much during the descent. When someone has a long torso combined with short femurs, the advantage multiplies. The weight stays more balanced over the middle of the foot throughout the entire movement. This reduces the moment arm at the hip, meaning the hips don't have to work as hard to control the weight. A longer torso also means more room for the back muscles to distribute force. The weight is spread over a larger area of the spine, which reduces the stress on any single point. People with this build can typically maintain better positions under heavy loads because their structure naturally supports the bar path that squatting requires. Wide pelvis. Hip structure is one of the most important but least obvious advantages in squatting. The pelvis width and how the hip sockets are shaped determine what stance width feels natural and how deep someone can squat comfortably. A wider pelvis allows a wider stance without creating excessive strain on the hip joints. Wider stances have mechanical benefits. They reduce the total depth needed to reach parallel because the legs are spread further apart. They also reduce how much hip flexion is required, which decreases the demand on the hip muscles and lower back. But pelvis width alone isn't everything. The orientation of the hip sockets matters just as much. Some people have hip sockets that point more forward, while others have sockets that point more to the side. The socket orientation determines how the thigh bone can move within the joint. People with favorable hip socket anatomy can squat deeper without their bones running into each other inside the joint. This prevents hip impingement and allows more neutral spine positioning at the bottom. This factor doesn't make someone stronger directly, but it determines whether certain squat styles are even possible. Someone with restricted hip anatomy might struggle to squat deep no matter how strong they are, while someone with open hips can sink down effortlessly. Long arms. Long arms are the most obvious and powerful advantage for the deadlift. The mechanism is simple. Longer arms mean the bar doesn't have to travel as far from the floor to lock out. This is pure range of motion reduction, and it makes a massive difference. When someone has long arms, they can grip the bar while maintaining a position that usually allows a slightly more upright torso at the start. A more upright torso can reduce shear stress on the lower back and improve overall leverage for initiating the pull. The bar path is shorter, and the starting position can feel stronger for many lifters. This advantage applies to both conventional and sumo deadlift styles. Long arms are universally beneficial for pulling weight off the ground. The difference can be several inches of bar travel, which translates into the ability to move more weight. This is why many elite deadlifters have noticeably long arms relative to their height. Short torso. For the conventional deadlift specifically, a shorter torso is a major advantage. The torso length affects where the shoulders sit relative to the hips when gripping the bar. A shorter torso means less horizontal distance between these 2 points. This reduced distance lowers the stress on the lower back. The spine acts like a lever during the deadlift, and a shorter lever requires less force to stay rigid under load. The lower back doesn't have to work as hard to keep the torso from rounding forward. Short torso lifters can keep their shoulders more directly over the bar at the start position. This creates a more vertical bar path and better force transfer from the legs through the hips. The weight moves more efficiently because less energy is lost fighting against poor leverage. This advantage is specific to conventional stance. Sumo deadlifts work differently and favor different proportions. Wide pelvis. The sumo deadlift demands different anatomy than conventional. A wide pelvis combined with mobile hip joints is the key advantage here. Sumo requires a very wide stance with the feet turned outward, and not everyone's hips can handle this position comfortably. A wide pelvis allows the legs to spread far apart without the hip joints reaching their limit. This wide stance reduces how far the bar has to travel because the hips start much closer to the bar. The leverage advantage is significant. The shorter range of motion means less work is required, but pelvis width isn't enough on its own. The hip sockets need to allow the extreme angles that sumo demands. The hips must be able to abduct, meaning move away from the body's center line, and externally rotate at the same time. Some people's hip anatomy simply won't allow this without severe discomfort or impingement. People built for sumo can keep the bar extremely close to their body while staying nearly upright. Their wide pelvis and open hip joints let them get into positions that would be impossible for someone with narrow hips or restricted hip sockets. This is why some people can pull huge weights sumo style while barely being able to break the floor conventional, and vice versa. The anatomy determines which style works.